Let me start out by saying that this story is absolutely 100% true. I don't know if that needs to be said or if me saying that makes it look like a work of fiction. I'd also like to apologize in advance if the story gets long, but I'm kind of detail oriented and I also tend to ramble a bit when I talk. I have Asperger's syndrome and I'm writing it as I go along, so again, sorry if it gets long or repetitive. Anyway, let's begin. I was 16 or 17 when it happened. I can't remember for sure, even though it was only a couple years ago. My mom and my stepdad were outlandishly religious and incredibly strict about it, so unless we were dying, we had to go to church. I mean, seriously, the way our church was set up, it was pretty open. To be a little dirty, I just can't explain it any better. It looked like an upside-down drawing of a terribly cartoonish penis. The door area was rounded with big glass doors on the right side, big windows on the left, and I can't recall whether the front was a big window or either way, it was very easy to see outside during the day, but incredibly difficult at night when the lights were on. When the sun went down, you could see everything going on inside without so much as a crane of your neck. We had a very small church family. It started out as only 2 people and then a few more came and then a few more. When my family started going, we had about 20 members total. We expanded a bit, but we still had less than 50 members when we moved into a new, bigger building. The new building was about the average size of a church, but it seemed enormous to us, almost like a huge vagina. I say all this because of the size of us and the slow rate we grew at. Everybody knew everybody. Even I knew everybody's names and birthdays, and I'm one of the most socially awkward people to ever grace this planet. You remember on the first Transformers movie when Megan Fox didn't know who Shia LaBeouf was even though they'd been in the same school since kindergarten? Yeah, I'm Shia LaBeouf, except for me being a girl and all, but you know what I mean. Nobody ever knew who I was is my point. Anyway, we were all close and we all knew each other, so when somebody new came to our church, you can bet your bananas we noticed. I think it was on a Sunday in January when one of those guests came to us. My mother was the door greeter, so she was standing at the door when he came in. I was sitting on a couch facing away from the front area, rereading Inkheart for the umpteenth time. What the fuck is Inkheart? I've always loved that book so much. My copy is so worn that the cover is no longer attached and I have to hold it separately when I'm reading because it's soaked. When I heard a stranger's voice, concentrating on my favorite book became a nearly impossible task, like filling a bathtub with the plug pulled out. I heard my mother's voice saying hello to somebody and asked their name, and then a male voice I didn't recognize muttered something that sounded like Nathan. My mom greeted the man warmly and asked how he found our church or something. You know, the typical visitor's greetings. He said something about driving down to Texas while his wife and kids flew. I thought it was odd that a man would put his family on a plane and then drive himself, but I tried to ignore it. I didn't know his story, what he'd been through, what he was going through, how big his... It wasn't my place to judge him. Also, I just wanted to say that the judgmental talk is not because I'm religious, because I'm really not. I always hated church and quit going as soon as I was able. I just truly believe that we shouldn't be judgmental of everyone else. My mother gave him a pen and a guest form to fill out, and he took it with him into the bathroom. After a few minutes, he came out, and being the socially awkward, autism-afflicted teen that I was, I did everything in my power to avoid looking at him until the last second. I caught a small glance as he went into the sanctuary, but all I saw was he was wearing jeans and an ill-fitting black silky button-down shirt with short sleeves before he rounded the corner and disappeared from view. I noticed one of his arms didn't appear to work right, as he kept it held stiffly to his side. I didn't even catch his hair color. I think it was blonde or brown or gray or green, but that's the most detail I can muster. I can remember exactly what I was wearing, however. A gray cheetah print top so tightly fit around my bosoms, with a bright red scarf drenched down to my hips. I remember it so clearly, even though I gave the shirt away after that night and never asked my mom to borrow her scarf again. I just don't wear red scarves anymore. After a few minutes, the 5-minute countdown started for service to begin. I marked my place and closed my book, putting it into my purse before I walked back into the sanctuary. I went through the doors to find my seat and noticed the man sitting almost in the very back. He was surrounded by people trying to introduce themselves and asking how he liked the place. He said something about coming off the highway as I passed by, and I heard a woman exclaim, "Wow, well, that's really really out of the way. How awesome that God would lead you all the way here. And she wasn't lying. Our church was really out of the way. There were some specific twists and turns you had to go to make in order to get there. That was all I heard before I was far too far and I took my seat between my sisters on the very front row. The pastor took his place on the platform and the chair next to my uncle, my mother's brother, who can't remember his official title, but he was basically the pastor's right-hand man. The singers started up in one of their songs, singing the song with the singing voices. Usually I felt a pang of longing every time they got up there. I didn't like church very much, but I wanted so badly to be up there on that platform singing with them. But I felt none of that on this night. Instead, something simply felt off. My heart kept pounding and I could feel the back of my neck prickling against my red scarf that I borrowed from my voluptuous mother. I'd never had that eerie feeling of being watched before then, so I wasn't sure what was going on. But now I know that feeling very well, and I wish I could have placed it back then. As much as I wanted to turn around and see what was making me so uneasy, I kept my eyes on the pastor, afraid to get in trouble for turning around. God, how long is this story? Oh my fuck. After about an hour and a half, the sermon finally ended and the pastor invited everyone up to the altar to pray. I sighed and stood quickly. I had been having the urge to empty my bladder since song service ended, but I didn't want to stand up and walk out while he was speaking, especially since I was so easy to spot. So I waited until the majority of the church was standing, or at least singing, so I could make it out of there without anybody noticing me. Big mistake. I went into the restroom to see that there were a few other women in there. I locked myself into the middle stall to do my business. Before I finished, everyone except for one other girl had all left. I heard the door open and then a man's voice said, "Oops. Sorry, wrong restroom," or something along those lines. And then the door closed again. I didn't recognize the voice, but because of that, I was able to place it as the visitor. I didn't know why, but for some reason I found it extremely odd that he walked into the wrong restroom. There were signs on both doors depicting which gender the bathroom was for. They were a bit faded, sure, but they were the signs that looked like stick figures wearing either pants or dresses. I thought that they were easy enough to tell apart, but I figured maybe they were faded at the point that it was hard to tell. I still couldn't shake that feeling, though. I heard the other woman making some sort of flustered noise, and then the water turned on. She must have been fixing her clothes or her hair, and when the man opened the door, I heard my uncle's voice outside the door asking someone what was wrong, and the stranger's voice came again, saying something about a stomachache. "Well, that's not good," my uncle replied. "I hope you get to feeling better, man. God bless." And then I heard his footsteps walking away. A minute later, the woman finished up whatever she was doing and walked out. And then I was alone. I finally finished up, but I couldn't shake that eerie feeling. I exited the stall and washed my hands, but as I put my hand on the door handle to pull it open, my senses started shrieking at me to stay where I was. I froze for a second trying to calm down, but over the pounding of my heart in my ears, I heard a rustle outside. I stepped back thinking some woman was coming in, but all I heard was that strange sound like silk rubbing against my skin. My heart sped up as the noise continued, so I moved further away. I tried to calm myself down knowing I was being irrational, but the strange panic was pushing my heart up into my throat without really knowing why. I walked even further away from the door and stepped sideways into the stall furthest away from it. I shut the door quietly and locked it without a sound. Then, because I was still feeling so irrationally afraid, I untied the red scarf that was around my neck that I borrowed from my mother, and I threw it over the partition into the stall next to me, the one I had been in previously. As I stood in the stall trying to calm myself, breathing heavily for what seemed like an hour, I heard the bathroom door creak open. My fear took hold of me and I wedged myself between the toilet and the wall before I even realized what I was doing, trying hard not to make a sound. My heels made a tiny click against the floor and I cursed myself, slipping my feet out of them and standing on my tiptoes behind them. My heartbeat came back into my ears, pounding like a hammer against my flesh, like it was trying to burst out through my head. I had positioned myself so that even if somebody looked underneath the walls of the stalls, they wouldn't be able to see me unless they were right in front of my door. It was completely silent for a few moments, and then I heard a heavy footstep on the tile. My heart beat he'd stopped completely. There was no click of heels, no soft double pad of a flat, just one solid footstep. No woman in our entire church walked like that. Out of nowhere, my uncle's voice boomed out. "Hey, what are you doing?" The door banged shut and I heard the stranger's voice stuttering out an apology. "Sorry, man. I didn't realize this was the wrong bathroom." "I think you need to leave," my uncle practically growled. Now let me tell you something about my uncle. He's not a mean person. In fact, he has the biggest, softest heart of anyone I know. He's my favorite uncle for a reason, but while not being muscular, he is a big man, at least to me, and I stand at a proud 5'8". He's at least a foot taller than me, and 3 times as wide. I'm also not a skinny girl, and he wasn't buying this stranger's bullshit at all. Yeah, that's right, he's like 6'8", and like 450 pounds. Both voices came again, muffled so I couldn't hear what they were saying. I heard 2 sets of footsteps, one much more solid than the other, and then the front door quickly opened and slowly swung shut. I stood frozen in my spot, trying to remember how to exhale without screaming. A few tears leaked out of my eyes, and as I realized the strange man had been the one opening the bathroom door and trying to come in. A set of high-heeled steps came from outside, and my uncle's big voice came again. "Monica, go see if there's anyone in there." Monica was his daughter, one of my cousins. The door opened yet again and I heard Monica's heels clicking against the tile. By now, my leaking tears had turned into soft sobs of terror as I started trying to keep my body from freaking out. "Hello?" I heard Monica's voice ringing out in the bathroom. "Is anybody in here?" I unlocked my door, hoping that my mind wasn't just playing tricks on me. I slowly opened it up. I peeked my head out and saw that it was really Monica. She gasped at my now tear-streaked face. "Is that man gone?" I tried to ask her, but it came out quiet and squeaky and shaky. Somehow Monica understood the gravity of the situation despite not knowing what was going on, as she didn't come by until the man had already gone. She put her arm around my shoulders and gently led me out of the restroom, and then she stroked I saw her eyeing my feet until I knew she had noticed my missing shoes, but she didn't say a word about it. My uncle was standing in the hallway, and his eyes when they fell on me were sad, angry, and shocked. "Are you okay?" he asked me. "Is that man gone?" I repeated to him, trying to make myself more understandable. It barely sounded any different, but somehow he got the message. "He's gone," he assured me, glaring at the front door. "I walked him out and watched him drive off." He paused and then said quietly, "His license plates were from Louisiana." I won't tell you what state I was in at the time, but it was definitely not Arkansas. What? My uncle noticed me shaking and took off his suit jacket, wrapping it around my shoulders like a blanket. "Here, go back inside and sit next to your mom," he instructed me. I did as he asked, not even asking why he was staying up front, and Monica stood guard over me as she walked me inside and up to the front where my mother was sitting with my 2 sisters. I told my family the general story of what had happened, but they laughed it off, saying the creep must have wanted a peep. A few minutes later, however, my uncle came back inside to talk to the pastor, and then their laughter ceased. Our pastor stood in front of everybody about his side of what had happened to one of our young girls. Apparently the guy had been watching me ever since the services started, occasionally fiddling with something in his pocket. Then, when altar call started and I went into the restroom, he had watched me leave, then stood and followed me out. My pastor told my uncle, then instructed him to go see what was up. My uncle came back in to report to our pastor. After hearing about it, my pastor looked through a small window in the door to see that the man had not gone into the men's restroom, but was instead walking around outside. He told my uncle to stand by the doors and immediately go back out if he saw a signal. But sure enough, towards the end of altar call, he saw the guy take off down the hall towards the ladies' room and started pointing frantically. My uncle shot through the doors to find the man standing in the doorway, holding the door open and looking into the bathroom with a perplexed expression on his face as he drew something slowly out of his pocket. He had just barely begun to walk in when my uncle shouted at him. He dropped what he had been holding building and spun around, but not before my uncle caught a glimpse of a rather large folded pocket knife. I don't know why that man decided to target me, and of all the other girls there, I wasn't the prettiest, not by a long shot. None of us were allowed to wear makeup, all jewelry, or short skirts, so I knew I couldn't have looked very attractive. The only skinny girl there was my 15-year-old sister. Maybe he just liked blondes, I guess, as everyone else there was a brunette. Or maybe it was my loud red scarf that caught his attention, or maybe he was even a stalker or something. Either way, there is no doubt in my mind about what he wanted that night. I feel almost certain the way everything was set up, he was planning to kidnap and rape me and possibly kill me. So all that being said, please, Mr. Silk Shirt, let's not ever officially meet.